If I remember correctly, Sanaka was one of the first PC games I ever played. And don't get me wrong, it's still in my top 10 all these years later, but I will admit I've developed a sort of love-hate relationship with it. You see, I love it mainly for its graphics and the storyline. The game looks stunning, even on low to mid settings, and at night, the bioluminescence makes it really seem like you're on an alien world. Though I do have to dock points for how it makes my aging laptop sound. But it is worth it. The other thing I really love is the Sea Emperor, whose story hits you pretty hard in the feels the first time you complete it. I mean, just look at this scene.
I thank you. Their freedom is my end. What will it be like, I wonder, to go to sleep and never wake up? Perhaps next we meet, I will be an ocean current, carrying seeds to a new land. Or a creature so small, it sees the gaps between the grains of sand. Farewell, friend.
While these things were all well and good, I did say this is kind of a love-hate relationship, and that's for one thing, and one thing only. This game has instilled within me a fear of deep, dark, open water. Not even Jaws has managed to scare me this badly. And the only part of that movie I'd seen up until buying Subnautica was a kid getting eaten at the beach. At least with Jaws I could still enjoy swimming, but with this game, however, I couldn't even shower without feeling some sort of fear. It was at this point I decided to do something about it, and eventually I realized that all this fear was coming from one thing within the game. The Reaper Leviathan. None of the other Leviathans in this game scare me. I've built bases next to all of them, except for the Reaper. I guess something about it just makes it, well, different. It could be the lack of bioluminescence, or the roar, or just the sheer number of them. But one thing's for certain, I was tired of being scared by it, and so I set out to fix it. I thought a good place to begin would be creating a fear hierarchy, which is basically a ranking of different aspects of your fear, with the least scary at the bottom and the scariest on top. The point is basically to use this to identify the root of your fear and then create a treatment plan from there. To start, I pretty much just created a new game in creative mode and swam to the back of the Aurora. Then I just swam around for a bit, taking notes about what the worst part of this experience was. After a while, I switched to survival to see if anything was amplified, and here's what I came up with. At the bottom of the hierarchy is the Reaper's design, which in isolation just doesn't scare me at all, which means it's the environment around it that builds tension, and that the Reaper's just there to anchor it all together. And also, a little while back, I made this thing, which not only hangs on the wall in my room, which means I see it all the time, but it's also warped my perception of the Reaper from absolutely terrifying to something that's kinda cute. The next tier up is the Reaper's roar. I kinda like the way the Reaper sounds, as it fits the design, and it's normally how you're alerted to the Reaper's presence. That being said, it's scary when you're next to the Reaper because the sound changes from this to this. And aside from that, I also think that it can be way too loud, even at the lowest volumes that you can set it to. The third tier is the surrounding environment. You see, the Reaper lives in fairly dark water around the dunes and the mountains, which makes it hard to see it, and even in the crash zone, it's hard to see because the water's so murky. I think this is scary because you don't see the Reaper until you're almost on top of it. Or more accurately, it's almost on top of you. The tier second from the top once again has to do with sighting the Reaper. And this tier is its bioluminescence, which is basically non-existent. The wiki shows a picture of it, and I show it at the end of this video, so it does exist, but you won't notice this in your average scenario. I think if it had a more obvious glow to it, like for example the Ghost Leviathan does, it wouldn't be nearly as scary, because you could see it easier and know it's there. And now for the final tier, the Reaper's aggression. The Reaper Leviathan is hands down the most aggressive and hardest to evade of all the hostile Leviathans. The others are pretty easy to avoid. Just grapple and jump over them in the prawn suit to avoid the sea dragon, or sink in the sea moth when you hear the ghost Leviathan coming. This doesn't always work with the Reaper, and it prevents you from escaping by holding onto your vehicle once it does get you. And even after it lets you go, it's not uncommon for it to grab you again before you can escape, which leads me to believe that the Reaper is only scary because of the idea that it could break your vehicle and leave you stranded, and nothing else. With the fear hierarchy finished, it's time to make an exposure hierarchy, which is an ordered list of steps I'll follow, incrementally evolving into facing the Reaper head-on. The goal is to break the main goal into several smaller, much more manageable chunks so that my confidence builds as I progress, and our ultimate showdown at the end feels like much less of a challenge. For this to work, I'm going to do each level in creative a few times, then a few more times in survival, and I'll explain each step as we go along. So a little blanket statement before we start this section. Advancing to the next step was based entirely on, vibes. If I didn't feel scared anymore or got annoyed by the Reaper, I moved on. The first step is observing the Reaper from within a sea base, pretty much just to get a good look at it from a safe point of view, which was probably the best way to ease myself into this whole thing. So I built a base behind the Aurora with multiple observatories and a moon pool, as well as an above water section. Then I just watched it. Nothing too interesting, though I did leave the base twice and nearly had a heart attack. The first was at night when I wasn't scanning for Reapers, and I could just hear it around me without being able to see anything. And this is the second time. When that happened, I think I just felt my heart jump out of my chest. Well, that's pretty much it for this section. Wasn't really anything revolutionary. Step 2 is doing laps around the Aurora in a Cyclops. It's the most well-lit of the Reaper-infested areas, and in a regular playthrough I actually take the Cyclops to the Aurora after using a stasis rifle to get rid of Sammy. I guess I just feel the safest piloting the Cyclops for some reason. As you can see from some of this footage, it went terribly. Recall earlier when I said I moved on if I got annoyed? This is one of those times. So I only did 2 laps in creative mode, then I upgraded the Cyclops to make this possible in survival, and did a survival lap. I used silent running because A, less Reaper attacks, meaning less power going into using the shields, and B, I couldn't take another 5 minutes of this. Overall, it was pretty uneventful, though I did click the shield upon hearing the roar, despite the fact that I should have expected it. Instinct, I guess, since I didn't have sight of it and could only hear it. Really, the only hiccup occurred upon reaching the void side of the Aurora, where I was pushed out of the water and nearly beached by one of the Reapers. But other than that, and the fact that a solar eclipse happened as soon as I neared Sammy's territory, it really wasn't that bad. Alright, now it's time to enter the dunes. I've actually never gone to the dunes before, and you can probably guess why.
Detecting multiple Leviathan class life forms in the region. Are you certain whatever you're doing is worth it?
Which is why I thought it would be good to include on the list. The plan for Step 3 is to take the longest path possible through the biome, starting in the Blood Kelp Trench to the south, and ending in the northern Blood Kelp. We'll do a trip on the surface, and another on the seafloor, and the survival one will be in the middle. Lap 1 went about as well as I expected it would, immediately got pushed off course by a Reaper, and ended up in the Mushroom Forest, then tried to course correct, and went straight into the void. Thankfully that initial attack was the only one, and I eventually reached the other Blood Kelp zone. After saying hi to our good friend the Ghost Leviathan and his crab-feet companion, I headed back south. Ran into 3 or 4 Reapers this time, but I managed to stay on course. Before going into survival, I created a prawn suit and maxed out its upgrades so I had an escape vessel. Just in case I needed it. This time I did 2 laps in survival. For the first I used silent running mode the entire time. I didn't get attacked once, though it was really dark and I had to rely on sonar to navigate, but I actually didn't feel scared. So I did another run without silent running. To maximize the fear factor, I also went about 50 meters further down below the surface, so I'd be alongside the Reapers instead of above them. Other than a slight hiccup or one lunge from under the sub, giving me a fraction of a second to turn on the shields, it wasn't any scarier than the first time. Okay, I think that about does it for the dunes. Now onto the mountains to find an isolated Reaper, because it's time for Step 4. Step 4 is going to be training using the Seamoth and prawn suit to escape after a Reaper attack. I thought this was important to include because it most closely mimics a real playthrough, as opposed to all the simulated stuff we've been doing thus far. So after parking my Cyclops and deploying the prawn suit, I went and messed around with the Reapers. I would swim next to them, get grabbed, retreat to the bulb zone, repair and repeat. I tried the prawn suit first because I knew it would be less scary than the Seamoth, and I was right. After making a Seamoth and upgrading it, I got back to antagonizing the Reapers. For now, I was only using the perimeter defense, so I couldn't do anything except avoid being grabbed. I instantly failed at this, then remembered the shockwave at the last second. I got better after that, however this happened. Which, despite this being a video entirely about the undisputed king of Subnautica jump scares, well, aside from ramming into fish, is the only time I was jump scared. I'm not going to dwell on this much more because by this point I was starting to treat the Reapers like gigantic, loud, spiky puppies, and even though that meant the plan was working, the next 2 phases are where things get really insane. We've reached Step 5, meaning it's time to wipe out some of the Reapers. We'll be trying a couple different methods. The first is with the prawn suit's ranged attack. After 8 minutes of trying, I finally just got out the stasis rifle and used the tried and true method of the thermoblade. But I died, which is actually my first ever death from a Reaper Leviathan, which then glitched and showed the death 4 more times, as if the game was trying to mock me. Next is the Seamoth's range attack. I spent 8 minutes trying, but got bored, especially because it decided to drift into the void. There are some highlights though. One time I hit the wrong button and got out of the Seamoth because I'm clearly a pro at video games. And twice I got teleported out of the Seamoth by a warper and promptly got my revenge. Apologies for not actually killing the Reaper with either of these methods, but by now I was more agitated than scared. Now it's time for our penultimate event, fighting it face to face. Here we're going to use the stasis rifle and anything else that can efficiently damage the Reaper. First up was floaters, but I got tired of waiting and almost died to them. Yeah, it wasn't the creature larger than anything on planet Earth that almost got me, but instead a bunch of tiny living balloons. I'll drop a link in the description to someone who successfully killed the Reaper using floaters because it is possible. It just takes a really long time. So I switched to gas pods, which took less than a minute. And because there were floaters attached to it, the Reaper floated instead of sinking, which allowed me to give us a good size comparison so you can get a good idea of what we're working with here. The wiki isn't lying, they are actually larger than a blue whale, which up until making this video was utterly terrifying to me. Next was the thermoblade again. This time was successful, though I almost choked in the beginning. So now that we've reached this point on my tier list / fear hierarchy, it seems like my fear of Reapers has subsided. But I've been using fancy equipment this entire video, which is nothing you can't get without encountering more than one Reaper, but it's still a rather large safety net. Okay, it's time for the ultimate test. Something so many new players have done as soon as they took control of the player for the very first time and beelined it straight for the Aurora. Swim with one face to face. We'll still be using the reinforced dive suit and the repulsion cannon, but other than that I'll be defenseless. And just for dramatic effect, Sammy will be our Reaper of choice. The goal is to survive for 5 minutes. Let's see how I do. That was actually a resounding success, though it wouldn't have been possible without having the repulsion cannon. At a few points, he was almost completely out of the water, with only the hitbox submerged. I got bit a few times, but for the most part, I think I won, and I've conquered my fear of Reaper Leviathans. So, what did we learn today? Well, for starters, I wasn't sure if this plan would actually work when I first devised it, but it certainly did. And we can absolutely say I'm at least desensitized to the Reapers now. There are some bloopers coming up after this, but if you've made it this far, I just want to say thanks for watching.
Ahead flagged. Emergency speed. Warning. Vessel calculating. Excessive noise. Ahead flagged. Emergency speed. Warning. Vessel calculating. Excessive noise.
Caution.
Engine
Continued
overheat.
degradation of the Aurora's drive core may result in a quantum detonation. Continuing to monitor